Hi everyone, welcome back to Brooke's Bites. I'm Brooke Goff, and it's been a bit. I was traveling, and as some of you know from my last interview, I was doing interviews on the ground as a press correspondent at the American Century Golf Championship. One of my most interesting interviews was with Charles Barkley, and we talked about what baked goods that he preferred. Check it out. So favorite cookie, because I'm going to talk about this interview on there.
My favorite cookie is white chocolate macadamia nuts. That's the greatest thing ever invented, in anything ever been invented in the world. White chocolate macadamia nut cookies is the greatest thing ever invented.
And they need to be soft, right?
They have to be soft.
White chocolate macadamia nut cookies, the greatest invention in the history of the world. Who knew? And Charles, you're saying that, and you haven't even tried mine. Maybe you'll think my version of those cookies are the greatest invention in the history of all time. Who knows? But send me your deets if you'd like to try them. Happy to send them to you, Charles. And we're going to get going here. We're going to make my version of white chocolate macadamia nut cookies. And I do agree with you. They are absolutely delicious and one of my favorites too. Firstly, these cookies are super simple. 1 stick of butter, softened butter. Throw them in, again, my Incarcerum mixer, which I absolutely love. There we go. Let it go. I always like to give the butter a head start before I add my sugar. Some people add them at the same time. I like to give the butter some time to break up. It just broke up. You can see it coming off of the beaters here. So I'm going to add my white sugar. Now let it go to town. It's really cool. It starts out as like crumbly and fun. You're going to let this go on for about, 2 minutes or so. My recipe is actually pretty simple. It's exactly what you would probably expect, to be completely honest. We have all the regular ingredients. We have our vanilla, we have an egg, we obviously have the butter, we have the sugar, all-purpose flour. I always recommend Bob's Red Mill. It is my absolute favorite, and for some reason the cookies do come out better. I'm sorry, they do. Baking powder, baking soda, cornstarch, kosher salt, and although I'm sorry, I usually use sea salt, and I usually use coarse sea salt because it brings out the chocolate a little bit more. And then I use a cup of macadamia nuts, but you got to crush them. I was at an event and they had white chocolate macadamia nut cookies, and I took a bite of one. They were whole macadamia nuts. No, they're supposed to be crushed. Now I'm not saying super thinly crushed, but you got to crush them up. So right now, what we got going on here, just going to turn up the heat a bit, is this thing's just going to go to town. I'm going to add my egg, just 1 egg, and I'm going to be brave. All success. I'm going to put it in right over there, and then I'm going to take my vanilla. And again, I never measure it out. I always recommend vanilla from Costco, guys. It's so much cheaper than going to the grocery store, and I go through so much of it. I'll go through this in like 3 months because I do all these segments, right? And I also do a lot of test baking. I'm not going to bake with y'all and show you how to make something and have it taste awful. I'm not going to do that. So I want to make sure it's good, so we do a lot of tests, and if it's not great, and we end up doing our own version, adding some things, subtracting some things to make sure it is great. So understand, when you get these recipes, usually they are tested at the helm. They come from other recipes that we've made changes to, but this recipe is my tried and true. I'm going to let this go to town, and we're going to work on our dry ingredients. So I have our flour, I have our salt, I have our baking powder, I have our baking soda, and I have my cornstarch. And then always whisk your dry ingredients, guys. I cannot tell you enough. A lot of people just like, okay, I've done it. I'm just going to dump it in. Do not do that. I have my ball whisk here. Again, I got this at Sur La Table. You can probably get one on Amazon. But it's great, and it prevents it from, number one, it mixes it better than any whisk I've ever had, but it also prevents it from coming up and hitting you, especially if you're using a super, super duper thin flour, like a cake flour, or even like cornstarch or powdered sugar or something where you're going to wear it. This prevents that from kind of happening to you. So Charles, how am I doing so far, right? All right, let's go. We're going to add our dry ingredients in. Again, slowly. No, I don't care what a recipe says, guys. You never want to add everything all together. Let it soak it up. Let it really take it down. And here's the deal. So Charles and I, as you saw, chatted about, because a cookie, you can have a favorite type of cookie, but there's many different ways that you can, well, not tons, but different ways that you can make a cookie. Crispy, underdone, done, soft, crispy being that all the way through, more well done, crispy edges, soft middle. Macadamia, chocolate chip macadamia nut cookies are supposed to be soft. They're supposed to be not very brown. They're supposed to be just done enough, but it keeps the gooiness a bit in the middle, so it's nice and super soft. So it's to be softest in the middle, then as you branch out, it's supposed to get just a little tiny less soft. No part of the cookie is ever supposed to be crispy on this cookie. Trust me when I tell you that underneath the cookie needs to be white, not brown. If it's brown, it's okay, I guess, but it's not gonna retain the flavor. You really want the cookie just done. How do you do that? Perfect segue for me to talk to you about that. It's all about timing. So let's say you bake the cookies. Let's say you bake them, you put them in, you bake it for 10 minutes. I usually say 11 for these, but 10. So the cookies are in, you take them out and you're like, oh, the top is just hard enough that it doesn't feel raw, but these are still a little, they don't look right. Let them set. Setting is the most important part. You take the cookies out on the sheet. Most people can't wait to grab their spatula. Leave them on the cookie sheet. It's gonna continue setting them and not cooking them per se, but a little bit, as long as it retains that heat. That's why a good cookie sheet's important. It's gonna keep setting them. Go back to them 7 minutes later when everything's done, and then take them off, and you will see they've really started to form up. Some recipes call for folding the chocolate chips and macadamia nuts. I don't. They don't want to overbeat because they don't want you to break them too much, but I don't see a difference. I do it, and for those of you that are using mixers, this is just such an easier solution. Just use your mixer. We're gonna add the chocolate chips. Just don't over mix it, and then add our nuts. Let them just go to town for a minute. You're gonna know when it's done. Turn it up for a second. Let it just toss it around in there. See, there's no harm in this. I'm not folding, I'm not wrecking my forearm. Okay, so we're done. Where do we go next? White chocolate macadamia nut cookies need to set. Okay, you have a lot going on. You have the macadamia nuts, you have the chocolate, and then you have this dough, which is a little sticky in the beginning, so you need to refrigerate this. You need to refrigerate it for about, I'd say 3 hours. You can do it overnight. My recommendation is overnight if you have the time. Anytime a cookie requires refrigeration, I always say overnight, at least 8 hours. It lets the flavors all soak in. It softens the nuts a little bit, so when you put them in, they're not going to be as hard and firm and crunchy, and it just brings the flavors all together. You got a lot of good stuff going on in here. You overnight, put them in the fridge and take them out. Take your coffee in the morning, do whatever you're doing in the morning, read the newspaper. Take it out and let it get room temperature, guys. Big mistake people make with these is that they're like, okay, it's out of the fridge, I'm gonna just try to form balls. You try to take it out in chunks and then take chunks out and it's all refrigerated, it's very cold. You never wanna cook with a cold dough. Take them out, 90 minutes later, roll them. I never ever use a spoon, guys. You want the cookies, and I'll show you what they look like. They look great. You just take the dough, make your size balls you want, twirl it in your hands, and then put it on the sheet. Like I said, bake it for 10. I always say 11 minutes on these. Pull them out. Yes, they're not gonna look done, it's okay. As long as the top is not sticking, right? You're fine. Let them set on your cookie sheet for 7 minutes, and then you have an amazing result. So Charles, how did I do? Here is my finished product. This is the next morning after you obviously have done everything. You've baked them, and look at these bad boys. They're not brown. Any brownness you may get is on the nut, but the cookie itself is not brown. And let's see how it tastes. Super formed, super soft in the middle. The tiniest bit bit of crispiness around, and delicious. So, again, looking for a great recipe, super easy. Have the night to let them refrigerate. I agree, Charles. White chocolate macadamia nut cookies for the win. Thanks, guys. Check out our other interviews coming up.